Littleton, welcome to the February 28th, 2024 Littleton Board of Health meeting. Our first hearing this evening is for 23 to 31 Stephen Street. It is a continued hearing regarding a Title V waiver and a shared system agreement. I'm going to be promoting the representative of the applicant.
And of note, Dan, before you get too far, it looks like Brenda's not here, so we need somebody to take minutes.
Okay, I forget who our clerk is at the moment. I'll be deathly honest. That would be Gino, who I don't see having joined us just yet. Can I ask? I'm going to say, Kevin, can I ask you just to scribble a little bit for me? Thank you, sir.
Give me 1 second while I get a thingy up to do the thingy.
All right, Attorney Gibbons, I apologize. Give us 1 second for operational side of things. I apologize.
No problem at all.
Okay, I'm ready.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. All right. So, thank you for that. Reminder that our administrative support is not available this evening. We'll be continuing with our hearing on 23 to 20. Continued hearing for a Title V waiver and a shared system agreement. Commissioner is Attorney Thomas Gibbons. Sir, floor is yours.
Good evening, board members. My name is Tom Gibbons, and as you know, I represent Thumbtack Realty LLC, and this is a continuance regarding 23 to 31 Stevens Street and 1 Adams Street in Littleton. So we had submitted just before your last meeting an amended proposed Title V waiver agreement. I did see before the meeting there was a question of whether anything new was submitted by my office, but my understanding there wasn't any expectation on my part that I was submitting anything new before tonight, but that you wanted the agreement to be reviewed by the board and by Jim. I'd like to just kind of recap the facts of this case. So the current system has served 1 Adams Street and 23 to 31 Stevens Street since the late 50s. Both properties are within the Phase 1 municipal sewer project. Both properties are included in a recorded municipal sewer betterment lien at the Registry of Deeds. And on February 21st, Corey Godfrey, the water and sewer superintendent, emailed my office and confirmed that both properties are on the same time frame for connection to the system, which he says is right now he's estimated to be June of 2025. So the agreement that we submitted provides for monthly inspections, and we would have RADA from AIR do the inspections, pumping every 2 months, and more often if the monthly inspections reveal the need for additional pumping, access to the property by the Board of Health agent. In the event of any happening that creates an imminent health hazard, then remedial measures up to and including a tight tank would be installed. $60,000 to be deposited into my attorney IOLTA account to fund those matters. So what I'm looking for tonight is a general consensus that agreement covers all the bases. Now, I am aware that you have a Title V waiver application process that I think came about after we started this process, because my associate had been before you a number of times, starting, I think, in the early summer. So I'm not disregarding that. If you tell me that the agreement is good in principle as to what it provides, I'll then submit the Title V waiver application. And I will submit copies of the deeds. The Title V waiver application will be signed by my client that owns 1 Adams Street and the current owner of the 23 to 31 Stevens Street. And then if granted, I will record it in line with your procedures and requirements.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go next to Jim Greffey, our health agent, for any feedback or input.
Sure. So I talked to Attorney Gibbons and Attorney Langlis shortly before she left. I guess, unfortunately, she's no longer with you guys.
Yes, that's right.
And one of the things we discussed is this is kind of an odd animal in that you've got two properties sharing this one system. Both of them need waivers, but how to deal with that shared system piece of it? It's pretty straightforward. If you have both properties have their own systems, they're responsible for any kind of maintenance and any kind of enforcement by the board. Here we are with one system, two separate owners. How do we affect? And does the board have the legal authority, and what documentation does the board need to have that authority? So, and talking with Attorney Gibbons, it would seem like you need a waiver agreement to both. Would seem like you need this agreement to do the operation and maintenance for the for the period of time that you have until you tie those properties in, and then somehow those waiver agreements need to be connected with that maintenance agreement. And I think the last we talked, we would need to see all those documents, and my recommendation to the board would be to have town council look at it and make sure that it provides you with the legal authority to do what you need to do in case that system fails. I understand the account is there. I guess I need to have a better sense of how it all legally ties together, where we're sharing one system. And there'll seem to be a third party, Mr. Gibbons's office, who will be responsible for payment of things. Again, it's one of these things. How does the board affect enforcement if they need to, with the three pieces of agreements, two waivers and a document to operate maintenance? So my recommendation is I don't necessarily have an objection in principle. I would just want town council to review it to make sure the town and the board is protected in all those situations.
All right, thank you, Jim. I'm going to open it up to the board. We're going to go alphabetical. Kevin Davis. I apologize, Kevin Baker.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have no questions.
Okay, Kevin Davis.
My only thing was, in the last meeting, we had talked about getting a shared system agreement in place, and then also following the waiver process. I appreciate the attorney saying that they're going to follow the waiver process that's in place. I am glad that we're going to have town council review things, because if the drafted agreement suffices as a shared system agreement, great, but I don't think it does. But I'll defer to town council.
Okay. Before we go to Mr. Wason, Jim, did you forward this to town council?
Have not yet at this point. Wanted to discuss it with you. I don't really have the authority to engage, so that's why I figured we'd discuss it. I wanted you to understand the pieces that are being presented and what I think about the pieces. Just, if I might, just to address Mr. Davis's comment about the shared system. I think a number of meetings ago, we took a look at putting, the appropriateness of a shared system agreement on this. And I think part of that is the agreement states that, unless it was a newly installed tight tank, that the board kind of agrees that it's in compliance with Title V. And I don't think the board would agree that a cesspool is in compliance. So I think the attorneys were looking for a way to get this to happen without a shared system agreement, because it would be difficult for the board to kind of certify that the system's in compliance with the code. I just want to explain that to you.
That's good. I don't need anything else.
Yep.
Attorney Gibbons, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, and so Jim, I appreciate that. I had a note here. I just wanted to get clarification. So what we've tried to do is get this agreement to cover all of the bases. A regular Title V waiver, having some funds there, having an agreement that if there's an imminent health hazard that we'll fix it, and a shared system. And because this system's been around since the 50s, is a lot of the provisions for a shared system. If we to do a shared system agreement, it just doesn't fit. So this is sort of to do both. We'll have all of the both property owners sign on it. We'll have funds there that are ready for use if there's a need, and the funds will be in my IOLTA account, so we don't have to, you don't have to chase a private party around. And I have the authority to use those funds in the agreement for these purposes. So I envision that this is one agreement that covers both your standard Title V waiver and the shared system agreement.
So while I understand your position, I'm just stating what I believe, and I didn't. That's great. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I apologize. Thank you for your patience. Matt Wason, go ahead.
I was kind of coming the same direction as Kevin Davis. This feels like a shared service agreement combined with a waiver, but it's kind of a unique shared service agreement because it's not a typical shared service agreement, and it's a unique waiver because it's not a typical waiver, and I'm totally fine with that. Let's make it all one, get it down council, get a sign off that it's all good, and I'm happy with it.
And from the chair, I think it is a little bit, again, we're trying to deal with three different oddities all in one document. I think I agree with it in principle. I'm not sure what the will of the board is, if we can agree to this in principle pending town council positive feedback. I'm not quite sure how to word this best. If we want to accept in principle and authorize the chair to finalize it, so we don't have, I believe our next meeting is March 13th. Would we want to bring this back before us again on March 13th, or can we approve this in principle pending town council feedback? I'm not sure what the will of the board, just so we can support the petitioner and keep things moving. Mr. Davis.
So again, I understand, but I would really like to see the waiver form that we have put in place filled out appropriately, as the attorney stated that would happen, and certainly submit this to town council to get approval, and through the chair, of course, give you that permission to go off and do said thing.
Attorney Gibbons.
Yes, and I'd be happy to do that, get your Title V application. We've kind of done like half of the things on the list. So if I can get, approval in principle, and then if town council, if they wanted to, feel free to email me or contact me directly and say, hey, we'd like to see this or that, subject to your approval, obviously. I know town council is not the final arbiter, but if there's something that they would like to see in it, they could email me in the interim, and I'll discuss it and add it if it's appropriate. But then once we have that agreement, then I will file it all with the Title V application and be ready to have the ordinary hearing that you guys envisioned when you adopted that procedure. And just one other thing I'll let you know is the property owner for 2331 Stevens Street, I've kept their attorney apprised, and he said, okay, as soon as you have this agreement form approved, they'll sign it, send me the original so I can submit it to the board.
Okay, what is the will of the board? Or I don't see any hands in the audience for any audience feedback. Any questions, comments, and what is the will of the board? Mr. Baker.
I would make a motion to accept the combination Title V waiver and shared system agreement, as long as we also get our forms filled out completely, and as long as everything's approved by town council.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis says yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. I will forward this to town administrator's office to connect for town council on our behalf, and we will let the board and Attorney Gibbons know as soon as we have any feedback. If the board is acceptable, as long as town council is comfortable with it, then we can consider it approved, or do we want to bring it back? Yep. If town council has feedback, we will connect town council with Attorney Gibbons. And I'd say if town council has significant, meaningful feedback short of grammatical edits, we'll bring it back before the board. If that's acceptable, are you guys okay with me being the arbiter of what includes grammatical edits versus substantive edits? All right. Thank you. Attorney Gibbons, does that sound like a reasonable plan for you and your parties?
That does. And I'll plan on being at your meeting at the next meeting, unless we resolve it and you tell me just go ahead and file the next the waiver. So I will see you then pending other instructions.
All right, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great night.
You as well.
Thanks.
So Dan, what I can do is put together maybe just a memo for town council to say the board's trying to achieve these two things in this document. Please review it with that in mind for the protection of the board and the town.
That would be awesome. Thank you very much. Yep. If
Okay.
you want to,
And
either
the
hold
waiver-
that to,
You
And the
want me to
waiver's
get that to
coming.
you so you can take a look at it and then send it on to council? How would you like to do that?
if you want to send it to me, that's fine. And then I'll get it to town council through the administrator's office. That would be great. Next couple days.
Yep,
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
no problem.
All right. Our next hearing, 7:10, is for 16 Cedar Road, continuation for variance requests, reduction of groundwater offsets and inlet and outlet pipe groundwater offsets. I don't see. I see a hand up. I'm going to promote Alec Congress as hopefully representing 16 Cedar.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can, sir. Welcome to the Littleton Board of Health meeting.
Hello, my name is Alec Chongris with Chongris Engineering. I'm helping out Ted Doucette on this project since he's out of the country today and couldn't attend this meeting. So I will be representing him and the client on his behalf. And so we're requesting two variances. The first variance is being the depth of groundwater reduction, and the second variance being allowing the inlets and outlets to be less than 12 inches from groundwater due to high groundwater. And the third is a variance request to allow for a sieve analysis since we were unable to perk during testing. And can I share my screen? Am I able to do that on this one?
You should be able to.
There we go. Alrighty. Can you guys see that?
We can.
Perfect. So here's the project where excuse me. Here's a project. We're proposing some Presby septic system. We have it going into these alternative system tanks. That's due to the site logistics is difficult to get a truck back in there to drop in drop in to a pump chamber and a concrete chamber. And those are what we're proposing for the septic tank and the pump chamber. And then we're proposing the system to be located in this section of the property. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to start with Jim Greffrey, our agent. Jim, do you have any feedback? So you weren't able to be at our last meeting. I'm not sure if you watched any of it regarding this one. We had some questions regarding the definition of a monolithic tank. We certainly understand it for concrete, but the engineer was not able to say the poly tank was truly a monolithic since it does come in two pieces and is bolted and seamed and gasketed and taped and belted, I believe is the list of items he said, but wasn't able to meet that. So without having you kind of be able to provide that feedback, we just wanted some of your input and thoughts on the alternative system with your notes mentioning monolithic as a requirement with the groundwater and this not being that. So sorry about that. Jim, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. There's no requirement in Title V that the tanks be monolithic. One of the things we like to do, particularly in the case of pump chambers, is have the tanks, we try to minimize places where water is going to seep in, and particularly in a pump chamber, which operates mostly empty. We don't want the water leaking in, potentially causing the pump to go off more often than it needs to be. So often when we're in a high water table situation, I will ask, and most designers now are specifying monolithic tanks. Again, it gets rid of the seam in the water table. I looked at the infiltrator tanks, and they are two-piece tanks. That looks like there's a gasketed, gasket in there that the tanks are then clipped together. So I think, I don't know if I can show you a picture of the specs in that. I don't know if that, or this is enough, or, oh, there you go. So two pieces that you can see the clips around the side that actually clip the tanks together. The concern with the tanks is if you look at the plan of the house, it's going to, at some point in time, they may have added onto that house after the current septic system was in there. And you can see where this kind of hash marked areas, that's all slope that goes down pretty close to the house. So being able to get a truck back there to be able to, with a boom, to reach out and set the tanks is probably going to be difficult, and I assume that's what it is. I don't really know because I don't install them, but that's what I'm surmising based on the request. Obviously we want the tanks to be tight. These tanks are approved for use in Massachusetts by the Department of Environmental Protection. One of the things that I'll work with the engineers on is just making sure the buoyancy calculations and any additional ballasts that are needed for the tanks are put in place. But they are a solution. I mean, in 34 years, I think I've seen the installation of maybe 8 plastic tanks. They don't get used a lot, but they get used in tough situations or tight situations. And the last time I saw them was on a lake lot where we had 18 feet between the house and the property line, and a retaining wall, which they had to kind of drop the tanks over and slide them into place. So they are a solution. They are approved. I don't know that I would call them monolithic by my definition of what monolithic is, because they are in 2 pieces. But monolithic is not a requirement. It's a very strong recommendation in high water table areas.
All right, thank you, sir. We're going to go to the board for any questions or feedback or comments. Kevin Baker.
I don't have any questions on this one.
All right, Kevin Davis.
All of my questions were answered because it has the edits for the local upgrade variants, as well as now the definition of what if monolithic is needed or not needed. And then Jim is correct in making sure that we don't have, if the fiberglass tanks are used, that we have the appropriate ballast so they don't pop out of the ground after installation like a pool. So.
All right, Matt Wason.
Yeah, that addresses most of it. I think Jim, the other thing was just when we had this last, the drawing that we saw was not the drawing I think that you had gotten, and it was more than just that. I think a tank moved and that kind of stuff. So I'm assuming you've looked at these latest plans and everything else is okay. I think that was your recommendation last time anyways.
Yes, I have.
Okay. There were just the changes started to add up. They were pretty minimal, but when there were that many of them, we just wanted to make sure that the whole plan was re-reviewed. And so that answered all my questions. Thank you.
All right, and from the chair, I think I just had one question. So both tanks are going to be poly per the plan. It looks like in Mr. Doucette's revised letter from the 15th, the second variance request talks about tanks will be provided with rubber boots cast in concrete septic tanks, and the plans require concrete water on the inlet and outlet pipes to reduce possibility. I guess thank you for pulling that up. That second bullet item under variance requests, it's still talking about, and maybe I'm just misreading it or reading too much into it, but it looks like rubber boots cast into concrete septic tanks, but that is not actually what's being proposed. That's not what's being proposed as being what's going in the ground.
That's just kind of you're talking about this bullet point right here.
Correct.
Yeah, that's just the local upgrade approval, the verbiage straight out of Title V. I think that's where I'm assuming is copied and pasted the from Title V and requesting the local upgrade approval.
If I may, Dan,
Yes, please.
the catch is that the drawing shows that those poly tanks are still alternates. Those aren't the primary design, as it were, but I think we've heard that that's probably the direction they would like to go because of the construction difficulties. But you're right. Technically, that variance request specifically mentions a concrete tank, not a poly tank.
Let me pull up the
the text you just had highlighted that you were showing us is what we're
right. Exactly. So I guess that was my only question, is that you're requesting a variance for reduction in the offset, which we understand, we're well aware of, but to address that Title V requirement of offsets.
I'm pulling up.
It's including that what you will do to manage that, to compensate or to deal with that variance request is to utilize rubber boots, casting concrete around the site. So I guess that request for variance, I'm just not sure from Jim's side, perhaps again seeing this more often than we do, that variance request. And we can adjust the variance request as a board as long as the petition is acceptable. But I just that variance request doesn't actually match what's being planned and what you're requesting.
If I can just quickly, I think that must have been, I'm sorry, I can't speak for 100% for Ted. I'm assuming that must have been more of a copy and paste from another project, because Title V, when you look at the regulation for the local upgrade approval under 15405, and I believe it's number J, the reduction requirement for the 12-inch separation between inlet and outlets and high groundwater, provided that all boots and pipe joints are sealed with hydraulic cement or installed with watertight sleeves, and the tank is proven watertight. Expandable foam spray is not acceptable alternative to seal and pipe joints. So the concrete verbiage is not necessarily part of Title V. It's talking about the that the joints there need to be sealed with hydraulic cement. So I think the concrete portion of it, I'm assuming it's not necessarily has to be a concrete tank, if that makes sense. And I could let me pull that up for you.
So how would you do it with a poly tank? How would you achieve that requirement with poly tank?
I don't do these. I'd have to, that's something we can follow back, but I'm sure that you can definitely seal up. Concrete's not the only thing that can be sealed. Concrete's actually rather porous, so I'm sure they have methods to seal rubber tanks or poly tanks.
So in that J that Alex has on the bigger page talks about, sealed hydraulic cement or in a watertight sleeve. So again, I'm hoping that Infiltrator, I don't see a lot of the tanks. I'm hoping that Infiltrator makes a product that helps fit that pipe to that tank so it seals tight.
Is that on the drawing?
They don't show the boots on the drawing. They just show the inlet of the outlets coming in. I don't know, Alex, if, oh, there you go.
Right, but what I'm asking is that on the drawing of the system that we're looking at? There where it says section A-A prime, and then you've got. I don't see a process by which we're going to. If you want to go to the alternate tanks. So right there, yeah, see. So right there, there's no boot or external concrete or whatever is used to seal it. I'm not the expert. I went and read the thing really quickly and I didn't see anything that provided that. But then on the previous drawing, if you scroll up to the top, you have, on the same drawing, if you go back to your drawing, go up to the main tank, you see that there's the concrete that's on the outside of it. Right. So I'm just asking where that's depicted on the drawing. Or Jim, is that necessary, or is that a field thing that you can do?
Generally, that's something we'd handle in the field. Now, the concrete tanks, a lot of them now are poured with the rubber boots in place. So often we'll use that as a standard for the board saying, poured in place rubber boots, because we see probably most of the tanks these days, concrete tanks, are done that way. The plastic tanks, I have, like I say, I see so few of them, and the last ones I saw, I don't believe had boots.
Okay.
But that's something, it needs to be sealed and tight in place. So certainly something we can do upon inspection.
That alleviates my concern then.
All right, thank you, sir. I don't see anyone in the audience. So I think at this point, other than, again, that various request not really being representative of what is being requested. The offset is what is being requested. The mitigation for the variance request really doesn't match what's being requested. What is the pleasure of the board?
I would make oh, sorry, Kevin, did you have something
Oh, go
else?
ahead. No, it was
Okay.
the same thing you were going to do.
I'm going to make a motion to, for 3 variances. First, allow reduction in groundwater from 4 feet to 2 feet for the Presby system. Number 2, allow the septic tank inlet and outlet and pump chamber to be located within 12 inches of the estimated groundwater, provided they are sealed per recommendations, either concrete boot or the manufacturer recommendations for those poly tanks. And thirdly, use of a perk test in lieu of a sieve analysis.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Perfect.
Alec, thank you so much for being here and helping out Ted so that we can take care of our resident, get them on, keep this thing going. We appreciate your help and understanding tonight.
No problem. Have a good one, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't have anyone in the audience. For those who know, Brenda is having some technical difficulties. She is here, and is able to hear us, but just isn't able to interact quite as much as she'd like at the moment. But she is with us, so she bounces in and out of the main room. That is why. All right, we're up to our 7:30, almost on time. 7:31 by my clock. Discussion for the model Board of Health regulations for private wells. If I can, I'm going to defer to Kevin Baker, who's kind of taken our lead for gathering and collating some of our feedback from our partners here in town.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did speak
Well,
to.
Real quick, we have a 7:20 agenda item.
We do.
Yes, we do. I apologize. My notes went too far, and I went right past that one of my notes. So
I
I
wanted to be on
apologize. I
time.
picked up where
It's
my
all right.
clear sheet was. Is the board acceptable to alternate, or would we like to go back to our 7:20 discussion? We'll go back to our 7:20 discussion for, I apologize, Mr. Baker, Title V waiver agreement, general discussion on the process.
So,
I apologize, Mr. Baker.
Dan, I asked to have this put on there just so I could have a means to kind of update you about the discussion we had about Northern Bank. We had talked about they want to go ahead and build the bank. They want to use the system for the barber shop.
Yeah.
I talked to DEP. DEP kind of went, I don't necessarily see an issue, but had some concerns that kind of expressed to me. One is, are there rules in the district, or does the board have rules that require somebody to connect if they're along the lines of the sewer? And I talked to Corey Godfrey, and it sounds like when they sign up for that there's a requirement to tie into sewer within 2 years. So I think that concern that DEP had was kind of assuaged. The board had kind of said, geez, if the system that's there isn't a failed system, doesn't need a waiver. Not necessarily. It's just, again, another one of these weirdo things where you're kind of allowing new construction on a site. It's under the design flow that system has, to the best of my, yeah, I'll verify that with the bank. That's an important piece because I'm worried about setting precedent about allowing people to tie into old systems that aren't failed and then doing new construction on them. So again, there's a lot of little pieces. I just wanted to make sure the board was comfortable and maybe get some direction on how you'd like me to proceed with Northern Bank on that.
All right, I'm going to open up to the board. Any feedback from anyone? I don't see anything from Mr. Davis. Mr. Baker's nothing. Mr. Wason?
I would just feel like this is not a normal Title V waiver for our new sewage system. This is a completely unique. Will you please let us waive Title V in a completely different way? So I would feel like the safest thing, and I think you just alluded to this, Jim, would be to say, yes, we will waive the not exactly stated requirements to build a new system with your new construction, but we will officially say that you are allowed to not do that, provided you do tie into sewer when available.
If I can paraphrase, so really this is
Thank you.
in principle acceptable under the incredibly unique one-off situation, but with the proviso that this is not a permanent system. This is merely a bridge to town septic. If town septic was not going on that street and they made the same proposal, that'd be a very different discussion. This is as a bridge, as long as the system is not failing and has designed adequacy for the proposed use as a bridge system, then as this one-off, not setting precedent necessarily, but as a very unique one-off system, it's probably accessible. It's probably acceptable. Matt, is that kind of where you're thinking?
Yeah.
Mr. Baker?
Jim, do we know the current rating for gallons per day on the existing system?
It's because it served the sub shop, it had to be
Yeah.
designed for 1,000 gallons a day because of food service. The other piece of it, which you know, it's that system's kind of unique in that it also has a small wastewater treatment tank in front of it, just so they could kind of get the height of the system down and fit it on the site because it's kind of behind the old gas station, the leach field. So it's not just a system that, you know, is only a couple of feet above the groundwater. I think it's 3. It's treated. It's got 1,000 gallons a day capacity, which is a good size. You know, if you were going to do this on one of those, this probably isn't the bad one to do that on.
And do you know the finished new construction, what the requirements are for gallons per day?
For that's the part I want to check with the bank, because I think what they want to do is maybe build the initial building on the site. Because at some point in time, if you look at the whole plans, there's going to be parking and drainage and kind of all where that septic system is. So my thought is if they're going to build out the whole plan, that system's going away anyway because it's in the way. They're going to tie into sewer. But at this point here, I think it's just the main building they wanted to get underway.
And prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy, you'd be the one to sign off on that, so we would know the usage and if it would be able to fit in the existing situation.
So what I would do is talk to the bank ahead of any kind of approval, saying, hey, what's the square footage? What's the design flow for this on the building permit for that building? Kind of state that in the agreement the board has with, for the site. So it's tied to the property. So when the building, excuse me, when the building and commissioner goes to sign it off, he says, hey, Board of Health, did they meet all these requirements? That way there kind of keeps it in the loop in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. Davis, I believe you had your hand up.
No, that pretty much, that was what I was going to say.
All right. Again, I'm not sure if we need an action.
No, I just want to be able to give them some direction saying this is, I didn't want to say yes if the board wasn't,
On board in principle.
yeah, and informed.
All right. Great. Yeah, it's an interesting solution, but it certainly makes more sense than putting in a brand new system when septic will hopefully be, or except town sewer will be hopefully available in the foreseeable future. So, and it sounds like the plan there is, yes, where the current barbershop and Subway is basically new strip mall, which again, I have not seen their big timeline plan, but my guess would be after sewer is available on the street, and that would be the build out at that point. But all right. Thank you, sir, for bringing that forth, letting us know and updating us in your feedback from DEP, which is always helpful.
You're welcome.
All right. I apologize for going out of order. Thank you, Matt, for catching that for me. I appreciate it. So now, no longer quite as on time as we were for our 7:30 hearing, or excuse me, 7:30 discussion regarding the model Board of Health regulations. Again, I defer to Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I did speak with Will Pickard of the Agricultural Commission, and he had spoken to Mike Patello. He's got a call in to him at MDAR, it's the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. And the Patello is speaking with the DEP and trying to get common language regarding agricultural irrigation wells. I don't believe there is any actual language out there specifying agricultural irrigation wells in Massachusetts as per the DEP. Jim, do you have any feedback on that?
No, because local regulations that I see kind of flip-flop between, and some have both. Some have an irrigation well kind of meant for someone doing their lawn, and an agricultural well, which they may be more inclined to grant because it's for farming. So that's kind of how those fall in line.
So I sort of read between the lines in my conversation with Mr. Pickard, and that it's going to take a long, long time for any definition of agricultural irrigation to come into Massachusetts here. So I think as a board, if we want to set out a definition, we're going to have to put our heads together along with Mr. Griffey and come up with an appropriate definition for this that does keep in mind the needs of the agricultural folks here in town.
Do we, again, just kind of talk this discussion, so it's kind of talking it through. As we look at wells, can we, or would we want to look at potable water wells as a single side and exclude, even if temporarily, wells exclusively for agriculture use, so irrigation or for true agriculture use wells as separate entities, and just look at potable water wells and that kind of do that part of the regulation. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking it through because yeah, if we want to be the front runners of establishing what the definition in Massachusetts is for an agricultural well, hey, I'm all for it. But is our time better used to address potable water, household residential water supply, and keep that as a sideline item, either follow along with DEP and agricultural and everyone else as they start to build that out, or because my guess is with the new model regulations, we are not the first board in the Commonwealth to start looking and thinking about this and have those same questions. I'm just not sure what the best way to move forward is, but I think if we wait for some standardized definition, we've got years.
Yeah, I think that
I'm just being realistic.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And that's, something we could do. We could work on just the potable wells and sort of table the agricultural irrigation wells, or we can define it, and put in a not very restrictive policy on how those wells are to be treated, and wait for the state to come out and put any further restrictions on them, just so we can call out the difference between them, or call out that a regular potable well that we are discussing here has nothing to do with agricultural, and only has to do with residential or commercial.
Mr. Wason.
In my head, I kind of look at it almost from the other direction, as to, instead of defining what the well is, defining what the usage is. It's the same thing, but I wonder if it'd be easier for our language to say, if you are using your well for human consumption, you therefore must meet these requirements. Next step down, if you happen to be using your well only for agricultural reasons, then we now have a lower set of requirements to obtain. If you are actually not using it for either of those things, and it is effectively an irrigation well, and we might need to brainstorm if we're missing a category kind of thing. But then you say, then you can meet this third tier of requirements or non-existent requirements, or whatever that would look like.
So I like that approach because it kind of, in my mind, is a flow chart. Like, you have a little flow chart thing that you're making. You have some if then else boxes and things like that. And we can have the definitions. I just want to remind everybody that we need to also think about geothermal wells and make sure they're excluded from all testing, period, end of statement. Because we don't want to even think about putting those into any testing regulation, because you don't use it for irrigation, you don't use it for agriculture, and you don't use it for potability. So
you're looking to exclude all geothermal well language from this document?
yeah, absolutely. Because
And simply add a simple line to that effect, that this
geothermal wells are excluded. I mean, to me, because I have a friend that lives in Stowe or Hudson, one of the two. And basically that town they have the same regulations from the DEP, but they did not put any language in there about a geothermal well. And he had to go get his well tested because they considered the geothermal well a potable well because it was being tied to the house. And I was like, yeah, we need to make sure that we don't do that, because you don't even access the water in a geothermal well. You put down a loop that takes the heat from the well itself, or puts the heat back into the well. So it's not even accessing the water, but that was their interpretation of that. So if we can make sure we do that, that would be really good. As far as the agriculture stuff, I think it would be really behoove us, instead of Mike punting to MDAR to make this, would be, if we want to put some sort of definition together, that we work with them to make sure that definition is plausible. You know what I mean? So that way we incorporate them into the process. Because the last thing I want to do is not have them incorporated in the process, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense? That's all I got.
So my last piece, thank you for bringing up the geothermal, but it's the last piece of it is if you talk about the usage, then you also don't get into a situation where this is an agricultural well, therefore it is functionally different than anything else, because it's not necessarily, right? Anybody at some point could take a well that's existing, that's pulling water out of the ground, and change the purpose of it in their area. And this would instead phrase as, okay, no, you're changing the usage of your existing well, therefore these are your new requirements. You're right, nothing changed in the ground, nothing changed in the piping, but because your usage has changed, here are now your new requirements. So that was the other reason I kind of feel like that, because you could then say, oh, you've decided to no longer grow crops and you just want to water your lawn. Great, you can lower your requirements now.
Dan, can I just,
Of course.
just to kind of muddy the geothermal thing a little bit, I'm sorry. We deal with two major types of geothermals, one more than the other. Most of the wells we see are what are called closed loops, as Kevin Davis described. You know, they run a loop down into a bentonite sealed casing. They just pump fluid back and forth out of the ground and do the heat exchange. The second one that we see from time to time, and actually very infrequently, is what's called an open loop, where they drop the water into the top of the well. And there's a document, DEP has guidance for geothermals, and in that document, they specify when something does or doesn't need to be tested. And sometimes an open loop, which is really awful, gets used as a dual purpose well. So you use it as yeah, exactly. I've only had that happen once. Water supply for your house and heat exchange. And in that case, you'd want to have them testing. So back to Matt's comment about use. If you do it by use, even the geothermals will have to be tested depending what they propose.
So correct.
No, it's again, it's one of these things you're having the discussion. I figured I'd put all the pieces in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And then the other thing that happens is that if you live next to a lake, you can have a closed loop geothermal that actually uses the lake as the heat offset. So
Yeah.
everybody that lives next to the lake that has access as waterfront, or to any one of the lakes, in fact, Spec Pond would be a perfect thing because of how deep it is. You send that geothermal loop out into Spec Pond, and you can use that as a geothermal heat sink. That's really what you're doing, right? And yeah, so you don't even have to dig a well.
And DEP does have a decent document on these geothermal wells. So as you're looking at your well regulations, that's one. And I think they reference it in the model regs.
Would you mind sending that along, that geothermal document
Sure.
that you have, Jim? That would be fabulous. So that way we can make sure we accurately say if it's a open loop geothermal, it is now classified as a potable water system.
Yep, I will send that along.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Kevin. I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, that's all right. Mr. Chobak actually went through and made comments on our OneDrive document. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at that, but I will go through and incorporate them in line by line. We're still waiting on Mr. Gerbig's comments, but I reached out to him and he will have that for us by our next meeting. And that's the update. I'd love if you guys could take a look at Mr. Chobak's comments in the OneDrive too, see if anything sticks out at you, and we can start to incorporate those and answer his questions too.
Could I get a spelling of Mr. Chobak's last name? Because I'm phonetically spelling it horribly for the notes, and I would at least like that.
CHROBAK.
Thank you. CHROBAK. Excellent.
And that's all I had.
Awesome. Mr. Baker, thank you for all your work on this. We appreciate you moving it forward and being diligent. I have no hands in the audience regarding our well regulation at the moment. I don't see any further hands from the board. So we're going to continue on to our 740 discussion around the infectious disease decision support tool. Dr. Wason, if you may.
Okay, here's this week's update. COVID-19 Omicron JN1, which was the prevalent variant last week, is also still the prevalent variant this week at 87%. Littleton case counts kind of on a downward trend, little hop up here last week or 2 weeks ago because of the delay in report that. But below 5, so still out there. We know that we know things are popping up. Vaccination rate 31% for our town, and the wastewater numbers have dropped below 1,000 for the first time since I think before the winter. So that's a good sign. We like to see those wastewater numbers dropping. Influenza at the state level remains moderate, so we're going to leave that as yellow. And vaccination rate is 51.2%, so almost achieved that 60% mark for the season, but I doubt we're going to get a lot of change now between now and the end of the season. And RSV continues its downward trend, as you can see over here on the right side. So that's still just kind of yellow because it's not back down to the close to zero line that we'd really like to see. The other thing you're hearing in the news right now is norovirus is all over New England and is highly transmissible and makes you really sick and unhappy. I don't know if Jim has any, details about our immediate locale. I haven't really heard much about it. The only thing I would say is it really behooves people to wash their hands with soap and water because hand sanitizer is not nearly as effective against norovirus as washing your hands. So just slapping a little bit of that alcohol on your hands isn't quite good enough. So wash your hands and stay home if you have a GI illness, please.
All right. Any questions from the board? Any
So,
additional information from Mr. Gareffi? I have nobody in the audience.
Yeah, Dan, I was talking to our public health nurse this afternoon, and she says she hasn't seen what she's seeing for norovirus is kind of the normal. So even because she mentioned that was in the news, but we really haven't seen any kind of unusual bumps in the norovirus at this point for our area.
good.
No, that's really, really helpful. Obviously, slow news day. And somebody in the newsroom knows somebody got norovirus and it's a story. Doesn't mean it's not out there. It doesn't mean people aren't getting sick, and I'm not minimizing it, but yeah, kind of sometimes the presentation doesn't always meet what the real numbers are out there or what we see on a regular basis. All right. Any questions for Matt regarding the ID decision support tool? Seeing none. We have administrative matters. We have 4 sets of minutes to review. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So our first set of minutes is for February 14, 2024. Mr. Baker was not present. But however, I believe we have quorum otherwise to review and approve if we desire. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from February 14, 2024? It was in our packet. All right. Any notes, comments, edits for?
There are a couple of grammatical fixes that I made late that Brenda has probably not seen yet, but they're just as a grammatical word swaps. They're later on.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments about 14? February 14.
I'm sure I don't have any. I'm good.
I think my only one was, I believe, from the open meeting rules is there's supposed to be an attached list of any documents presented during a meeting. The documents don't necessarily need to be attached, but the list of what the documents were, so basically plans that were presented, there needs to be a list of the plans presented, documents presented, etc., attached to the minutes, just so if someone does have a question about what was presented, they can actually go back and basically it's a footnote. It's a reference to the plans or pieces that were presented during the meeting. So Brenda, if you wouldn't mind adding, those lists, and I think it's for most of our meeting minutes, just those lists of any documents or articles that were presented as part of the meeting. All right, other than the grammatical additions that Matt made online and my request to add just a reference list at the end, just the documents presented for each hearing. What is the will of the board for February 14, 2024?
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes with the grammatical changes and the attachment of presented documents as references for February 14th, 2024.
I have a motion.
Apologies, I thought we were going in order, so I was talking about the April one. So I do not have any grammatical fixes for February 14th. Therefore, I will second your motion, but that part doesn't matter.
Okay.
Friendly amended, so moved.
We have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes for February 14th with the addition of a documents reference list for the minutes as otherwise presented. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker. Kevin Baker abstains. Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. Minutes for February 14, 2024 are approved. I apologize for the rapid scroll, everybody. I hate that when it's on screen. All right. This is from some time ago. At this point, we have meeting minutes for April 12, 2023. All members here this evening were present for the meeting. Did anyone have any feedback for April 12, 2023?
Make a motion to approve as presented the minutes for April 12th, 2023.
I have a motion and I would
If you
say
would be
that-
so polite, this is the one that I added the grammatical fixes to.
okay.
If you would like to amend your motion to include that as well as the list of presented documents.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for April 12th, 2023, with the correction of the grammatical fixes Mr. Wason has put forward and the addition of the supporting documents for the meeting agenda items.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. April 12, 2023 meeting minutes approved with those edits. Our next meeting minutes would be June 14, 2023. Any comments, questions, suggestions? We do have quorum of members present for this meeting present this evening.
I don't see any comments or changes made on these from anyone else, and I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented to include the documentation for the meeting agenda items for June 14, 2023.
I have a motion on the floor
Second.
and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Abstain.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. Meeting minutes for June 14, 2023 approved as amended. Our final set of minutes for this evening is June 28, 2023. All members were present. Any comments from the board?
I don't see any board member comments on the meeting minutes here, so I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for June 28, 2023 as presented with the addition of the supporting documents for the items on the meeting agenda.
I have a motion on the floor
Second.
and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. meeting minutes for June 28, 2023 are approved as amended. I believe, I'm not positive, Brenda, correct us. I think that gets us up to date with our minutes up until tonight. So thank you for everybody's work. Thank you, Brenda, for pulling these all out and getting them wrapped up. So we appreciate everybody's work on these. This is great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Brenda.
Hi, guys.
Welcome.
Good evening. The only ones that are left are actually, I believe, 124, that 3.5 hour board meeting that I have not completed yet. But I will by the next meeting. Yeah, that was a long meeting, so.
Rain in my parade, but no, thank you. We understand that they're challenging, particularly long ones. So I apologize. We are not quite caught up, but we are so close. So thank you, Brenda, for your work on this. We are a ton better than where we were. So this is still great. We appreciate it. All right. I believe that gets us to correspondence. I'll open up to the floor if anybody has any correspondence, and I do have a piece, but I can wait till others are done. Anyone have any correspondence? All right. I think at our last meeting we talked about timeliness of submissions for board review prior to meetings and hearings. That I think for our last meeting or the meeting prior to, we had a number of things that basically came in late afternoon on the day of the hearing, the day of our meeting, and had limited opportunity for board members to have meaningful review prior to trying to make a decision. I reached out to the town administrator's office and requested their input directly, as well as if they could connect us with some of our other peer, particularly regulatory boards here in town, for kind of, is there a process that they utilize, and is there a way that perhaps the Littleton itself can come up with a norm, if not a standard, at least a norm of what expectations are for boards in general and regulatory boards particular, for the timeliness of submissions for board review. Obviously we have some guidances for Jim, for example. He has, Title V has, requirements of how long they have to review and provide feedback. And there's lots of timelines built into that side of things, but there's no real timelines built in for submissions to the body for review. So at this point, we did hear back from the town administrator's office. They don't have a standard, but they actually thought that it would be, again, that piece of perhaps having a town-wide norm expectation would be a valuable thing for all bodies and for the community to know this is the expectation as you submit. I did hear back from conservation, not from the Conservation Commission, but from the agent. And they have a minimum of 1 week prior to so they meet on Tuesdays. They need to have all final things into the office by the previous Wednesday, so 6 days prior to the hearing. They will accept things after that. So if someone brings something in on Monday for their Wednesday, or for their Tuesday meeting, or for Friday for their Tuesday meeting, it will be accepted, but the petitioner, the submitter, is told that because this is past the window, that basically anticipate a continuance because of not an adequate amount of time for review. Doesn't mean it will happen, but that expectation is set right from the outset that nope, it's less than a week prior to the meeting, that a continuance is, expect a continuance. If you have an action, then you've had an action. But certainly, like we said with our last one, we had a submission at 6:21 on the evening of our meeting, which really isn't fair either to us, to the community which we're trying to serve, or truthfully for the petitioner, because it's not an opportunity really to provide any meaningful feedback and set the expectation where, perhaps there are other ways of doing it if we set the expectation that things need to be in a timely manner. So I'm not sure what action, if any, we want to take. I'm hoping to get some more feedback from other boards who may have, seen that similar pieces. I think conservation is relatively similar to us. I think probably the only other one that would be off the top of my head would be select board in kind of the timeliness side of things. that, if we are unable to take an action short of an emergency meeting, we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how the calendar falls before our next meeting, and someone could move forward with a Title V repair, for example. So, I think there's certainly multiple boards who have that same kind of things that come up that time is significant. I think many of ours are. I'm not sure how we want to act, if we want to take any action or just continue review and see what we want to do as a town or ourselves. Mr. Davis, your hand's up.
So the zoning board of appeals doesn't have a timeliness, and the planning board doesn't have a timeliness.
I have shared what I have gotten back.
Got
So
it.
they could. At this point, the town administrator's office does not know of a town-wide standard.
Right.
Individual
Okay.
boards or departments may have their own. The only one I've heard back from this point is the conservation agent and their process. And it's as I described, that basically it's everything needs to be in with the application 2 weeks ahead of time, and then any revisions or anything need to be back by I think they said the Wednesday before their regular Tuesday meeting, for full consideration. If it's after that, so less than that 6-day window, they're advised that, action may be taken, but a continuance would not be unheard of, or would be also considered a normal action because of inadequate time for board members and the agent to review. So, which seems pretty reasonable. Certainly, that when Jim gets an email at 6:30 with, "Hey, by the way, I changed the plans," and you're walking into a hearing at 7 o'clock, can you provide meaningful feedback? That's really not fair to our agent, which means it's not fair to us to be able to have our expert provide us with his knowledge and expertise. And then that means we can't do our job very well. So, which is kind of what prompted the request for the town. Matt, I saw your hand go up.
Yep. So we need a process map. I don't necessarily want to wait for all the other boards to respond. I'd love a townwide standard, but I also feel like we can just kind of start putting something together anyways. And the reason why I say process map is because it's a two-way street. So we have a meeting here and we say we're going to put somebody on another meeting, or they get in touch with Jim and need to be put on the meeting. So the start date for me is kind of when we find out they might be coming in the next meeting. And then there needs to be Brenda's putting it on the draft agenda as she builds it. And then a piece of communication goes back to that party and says, "You're penciled into our agenda for this date." And at some point, right, the agenda is finalized after we review it. So I think one question would be, and it doesn't have to be answered right this second, but would be, when does Brenda formally tell somebody you're on the agenda at this time? And do we need those materials really quickly, or is it something where we could say, you are penciled into the agenda on this date, you will need to have your materials in by this date? As long as we set that time frame, I think we could start using something. But like I said, I feel like I would, and I'm happy to maybe email Brenda, and I know she's here, she and I could just kind of put together that timeline for maybe us to review at our next meeting to figure out, okay, where's the communication going, and when can we say we want that document by? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here if I may, Matt. So I definitely agree with you, but the timeframes can be different depending upon when I get an email or receive a request for getting on the agenda, whether it be the engineer or Jim. And as I mentioned, I think our last meeting, I definitely agree. I believe you mentioned that Monday maybe could be that cutoff time, because the agenda has to be in to the town and to the town clerks. And I did speak, I don't know if the board received my email with the information that I did speak with the assistant town clerk regarding if there was any type of like the 48-hour bylaws to say that you have to have your meeting information in. And she said, no, as long as it's in the agenda, you could, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but there's no timeline. And if somebody sends something at 6:45, we can add it to that meeting packet and send it off. Now, I don't agree with that because you need time to read it, and I get that. So I like the idea of the Monday, when I have to submit that, agenda and you're on that agenda, if you don't have your information to me, should they or should they not be listed for that Wednesday? But in reference to when they come to me, it differs. And if you have a butter notifications, you have to send those a butter notification 16 days before the meeting. But somebody could come to me before, but not every variance needs a butter notification. So someone can come to me on a Friday before the meeting and say, can I get on the agenda? So the agenda has not yet been posted, or so I can add them even up until that Monday when that agenda is posted to the clerk's office. As long as I get that in, and there was a revision on Monday and I said, hey, Kim, I have a revision. As long as that's posted before the end of day, then they can be on that meeting for that Wednesday.
So I think we have two lines here. So we have our open meeting law requirement with our 48-hour notice and
Yes.
having adequate amount of information on our agenda so that the public is aware of what's going to be discussed.
Right.
We have a separate
Kim
item.
said- Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We have a separate item here, which is beyond the open meeting law piece, which is that 48-hour requirement, and that is adequacy of time for staff and board members to meaningfully review information prior to
Yes.
having an item placed on the agenda. And those are kind of two pieces. So we can obviously choose to place an agenda item on, if it's anticipated up until Monday afternoon. If it is
Exactly.
not anticipated but emergent, we can in fact put an item on as long as we declare it as emergent and, does not, that violates the 48-hour requirement, but because of an emergency nature that's acceptable, and that's an acceptable variance for the 48-hour rule. But I think we're kind of back to that piece of what is our standard. So we're going to kind of bounce to Jim and Brenda for a kind of a quick flow question without going too far into it, is that I'm representing a new construction and I'm building a house on a street, and hey, I know I'm going to need to be on the agenda because I know the building is going to be next to a wetlands and I know to be on the agenda. Can you put me on? Is that enough to get penciled into a date? Do I need to put a formal application in with finalized or at least preliminary plans to get a preliminary date? Or do I need to have plans in, feedback, and basically final plans in before I get a date? Kind of what is that workflow?
So if I can start, Dan,
Yeah,
what I
Jim.
try to do, just particularly with the upgrades, in the interest of time, for residents in town to make sure they can get their permits in a timely manner, I generally tell the designer, as soon as you have a plan and the letter that describing the variances, to get that to Brenda so that she can take a look at the board schedule and get them on the next available meeting. Now, as Brenda mentioned, sometimes you need that notification process, and so they need to make sure they leave enough time to make sure they can get a date from Brenda so they can put it on the notice that they send out ahead of the hearings. So again, I always talk to the designer and say, hey, look, get on the first agenda. You get the material to Brenda as soon as possible so you can get on the agenda.
Right. And that normally happens, Jim, usually within a week. I mean, there's only a two week span. So when somebody emails me and they say, hey, I want to get on the agenda, I immediately email them back. Well, not immediately, but at least within the day or 24 hours, and say, okay, I penciled you in. And then I start the draft meeting agenda, and I will put them in. And then I ask them to send them the information before the Monday before that agenda is due. I do ask them that in my email, if you could please send me all your pertinent information, all of your plans. And then once they send that to me, I just put it in a file until, I put the meeting packet together. But normally I ask them if they could please send it to me before that Monday, because if I don't have it by that Monday, then that can create problems with the last minute. And I mean, it shouldn't be that way.
Mr. Davis, sorry, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no worries. What I went out and did a little Googling and found out that the planning board has a whole set of regulations on the website. And 332 says that the applicant may submit written materials until 10 business days before the hearing and 10 business days before any subsequent continuation of the hearing. The board shall not be obligated to review written materials received less than 10 days before a hearing or continuance thereof, and blah, 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 blah. So that's the planning boards. I just wanted to found that for us. So
Nope, thank you. Something I think, with Jim, and we appreciate you trying to try to balance for folks, getting them on even before they're necessarily ready to be on, because we want to be timely. But certainly that challenge of, you're getting plans. I know for one of our recent hearings, you get plans the day of the hearing with revisions. That's, again, depending on what your schedule looks like, I can certainly see that being very easy, that you never saw the email, never mind had a chance to meaningfully review plans before walking into a public hearing. And that's, again, kind of puts all of us in a challenging position. Again, we won't take action tonight, I don't think, although it's a process we probably could. Mr. Baker, go ahead.
I believe the latest revision of any plans that we'll be looking at a meeting should be on the desk and in Jim's hands no later than 1 week before the meeting.
And say that would give Jim some flexibility in review and
At
provide
least he'd
feedback
have
to us.
he'd have 2 days to look at it because he's in on Tuesdays and he's in on Thursdays. So he'd be able to come in the office, see that the plans were there, and review them.
and
Having time for us.
and anything and then anything inside of that is not guaranteed to be,
On.
It could be there, but not reviewed. And then if we don't have Jim's review, you've seen what happens most of the time. You get a continuance. You're muted, Jim.
And that kind of defers back to what Dan was mentioning about conservation. We might consider it. It can be on the agenda, but we might not be able to consider it. So, yeah, I think that's fair.
Can we, certainly I would hope that while it's a little bit of police work for Brenda, it also hopefully gets rid of some of the last minute stuff for her. Because if all the materials are in on the previous Wednesday, that the packet can be built, the agenda can be drafted, we can be getting the packet on Friday or Saturday or Thursday afternoon or whatever, rather than on Wednesday afternoon, which gives us a better chance to be able to actually review materials as well. And it's not a last minute race for her, while there certainly may be edits or additions that can be added on. It's some leeway. So if Friday's a busy Friday, well, okay, the packet can still go out on Monday because the packet's complete, or at least all the materials are in hand, even if not the packet is assembled, rather than waiting down to the last minute because someone didn't get things in until Wednesday afternoon at 3:30. So hopefully from a workflow piece as well, that it's some flexibility for Brenda's as well to be able to manage her workload and prioritize as needed in her office, rather than I need to drop everything to manage the Board of Health packet for tonight because the meeting is tonight. Do we want to put again, a little bit of police work for Brenda, but say final materials for a hearing need to be in on the previous Wednesday? And then if it's not there, then you know what? Anticipate a continuance. Doesn't mean we'll get a continuance, but
if I may, I think that might be a little bit too soon, because normally I send out the meeting agenda, which has all of the items on it and who's coming to the board, regardless if I have their information or not, usually by Wednesday or Thursday.
Monday prior?
No,
I'm happy to go
no.
2 weeks, but I also want to be timely.
No, I know. So we have 2 weeks. So if somebody's coming, just say, okay, the Thursday after that, after the meeting that we have. Okay, so someone sends me a request tomorrow and says, hey, I want to get on your next agenda. That's almost 2 weeks. Okay. I say, okay, I pencil them in. I start the draft agenda, but I normally send that agenda out Wednesday or Thursday of the next week for you to review. So, the board knows who is on that agenda, regardless if I have their information in my hand. So I understand we're talking about revisions last minute, but you can see who was on this, who was already on the agenda. So for me, they're already on the agenda. That's not going to change. And that Monday before that, I send that agenda to the clerk's office to be posted. If there's any changes or additions, that could happen. And be mindful, we work till 12:30 on Fridays, so that's on a full day to be getting last minute plans. But that Monday we do work till 6 o'clock, so we do literally have to the end of day. But I like to at least cut it off at 3 p.m. And get that agenda posted to the clerk's office. So the only difference would be they're still listed. If they send me things on Monday, that's still okay to put in the meeting packet to send to you by at least Monday afternoon or Tuesday, sometime on Tuesday. Is that not sufficient time?
For Jim or for the board to adequately review plans, I'll be honest, and I know how hard you work. We got today's packet at 4 o'clock something today. So for those of us who have other requirements, other commitments, they're getting a packet 2.5 hours prior to a meeting is not adequate time to meaningfully review materials, particularly if they're complex. That getting a packet 2.5 hours before a regulatory board meeting, I'll be honest, is not adequate. We need to be getting packets days ahead of time. Just simply because, again, we had one plan tonight. The other pieces, were things we've seen before, but it really is not adequate. And when we have 3 or 4 or 5 hearings with meaningful, complex plans, same day packets are not really adequate. So yes, we have our Title V, our open meeting law piece of, you're right. We have theoretically until 6:59 on Monday, is 48 hours to revise our agenda. But we're not talking about the legal piece. We're talking about operationally of what is reasonable to allow our professional staff to review and provide meaningful feedback, as well as for the board to be able to provide or to be able to review the materials and have reasonable questions and understanding of the materials that we are expected to act on behalf of the community. So I think that's where this is coming from. This is not a open meeting law 48-hour piece. This is an operational piece of how much time do we need as board members? Does Jim need as a professional to adequately review and provide meaningful feedback and fulfill our requirements as elected members? What that timeline looks like. So some benefits of that, again, is that we give you some flexibility of when that can be done. We give Jim some flexibility that if he gets something late and it's past the deadline, that he can prioritize. Because again, he's got a lot of things on his plate as well, and some things are much more emergent than a new construction Title V plan. That's the nature of public health. So having that flexibility is, I think, where we're looking at, and having the ability to provide meaningful review and feedback and ask appropriate and meaningful questions. So if we said all final materials need to be in on the previous Monday, so 9 days, what is that? It's 5, 6, 7 business days, 8 business days prior to our meeting. I'm not sure if we want to say to be on the agenda at all, because certainly if someone has sent out green cards for a public hearing for their piece, they have to notify what the date of the hearing is. So I would hate to take someone off an agenda that they've already notified abutters for because the petitioner didn't get their materials in until Wednesday at 4 p.m. That's a challenge of their own making, I would say, but it still isn't necessarily fair to the resident who has hired a professional to do a job and then their paperwork comes in late. I'm not sure, again, how to balance that, but I mean, what do we want to say? Everything needs to be in, we'll accept, but potential for continuance because of inadequate time to review. Is the previous Monday adequate? So to be whatever that is, 5, 6, 7 business days prior to the meeting for Jim and for us to review. Is that something that is operationally doable from the office, either from Jim's office or from Brenda to, provide that feedback going, you know what? When, hey, I want to be in the agenda. Great. Okay. You want to be in the agenda for March 13th. All your materials need to be in the board's hands by Monday the 4th. And if it's not, you can stay in the agenda, but any actions, you'll be kind of at the will of the board, what actions will be taken at that point. So I don't know. That would give Brenda her time for draft agendas going out on the Wednesday. And then, once that's approved, having our packet in our hand Friday afternoon or Monday day does not seem unreasonable. Not saying that, again, edits don't come out after that as far as packet content, but minute agenda content short of emergency, we probably shouldn't be having new agenda items being placed on our agenda on Monday, short of emergency actions or darn near close to it. So, Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think 7 business days in advance or eight business days, if that means the Monday, would be appropriate enough time for everybody to get a hold on what needs to happen, and also it will protect us and not waste our time.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, this is an operational piece. I don't think we need an action. I'm not sure how, I'll be honest, I'm not sure how town hall operates from a standard operating procedure perspective of, does it need to be an SOP of when cutoffs are? I simply don't know from an operational side because we're not in town hall of how the paid staff manages some of these pieces. Mr. Baker.
This question is for Brenda, actually, Mr. Chair. Brenda, is there a flow chart for folks that come into the office that are requesting to come in front of the board? Sort of, this is what you have to do first. You fill out the application process and have all your materials to us by this day.
That's a great question, Kevin. Actually, there is not. And I was going to actually pose that question because there isn't. Normally, even when I talked to the conservation agent, and I did ask her, do you have a timeline? Is there a cutoff date? I did ask the assistant town clerk. She said there is none. There is none. But there isn't a flow chart to say, okay, here's the variance request letter. I know we did speak about getting an application, and I think that's something that we really should get in place. And when someone has a variance request, that we give them that variance request letter, they fill that out, and then maybe we do a timeline in a flow. Because if they come in, I will take Ted Doucette for instance. After we had our meeting on the 14th, he came in on the 15th, and he said, "Here's my updated plans." 2 weeks in advance. So I put him on the meeting, I put those aside, I scanned them. And if I have something from Jim will say, so-and-so wants to be on the meeting next week. Does it require abutter notifications? No, it doesn't. Okay. I put them on the agenda, and then I normally send that agenda within a week before for the board to review. And the updates really don't change from that Wednesday to that Monday. But to answer your question, there's not a specific flow, and that may be helpful.
Yeah, at least, when they come in and they request the variance, we can say, okay, well, today is, February 28th. That means you want to be on the March 13th meeting, and just write in the date. You need to have your stuff in by March 4th. Just so they know.
Yeah.
All right.
I can ask one question just to help give us direction. I agree a process map is necessary. I'm happy to help put one together. My key question would be though, we heard Wednesday prior, we heard Monday prior. I would try to pick the time based upon how much time this board feels it needs to review the documents, because we can push it back a month and have plenty of time. but every day we push it back makes it harder and harder. And maybe we need two things, because let's say tonight we continue something and somebody needs to go do some extra work. We effectively just gave them 2 business days to get it done, because they need to get the materials to us by that 3rd business day. And so will they actually feel tight by that? And is it really necessary? So do we need it Monday prior as a board? How much time do we need to review stuff before a meeting?
I mean, I think it would be two. I think okay, it's been a long day. I think we have kind of 2 pieces. One, we have opportunity for the professional staff to get materials and provide their review and feedback, ask any questions that need to be going back to the engineer or the petitioner. I mean, I think truthfully for me, I would probably be okay with getting the packet on Monday morning. Between Monday and Tuesday, and between Monday day, Tuesday day, and Wednesday day, I can probably have adequate time to meaningfully review packets. I'll be honest, Wednesday afternoons are challenging for me. That packet review is not as adequate as I would like it to be when we get it on a Wednesday. So, I mean, I think that is kind of a bit of the will of the board of how much time we think we need to have it in hand, and then do our backdater of like, okay, if we want it in our hands by Monday morning, then okay, what's our backdate from there to provide time for Jim or our department to review and provide feedback or ask any clarifying questions that they need. I don't know. Is at the same time, I think asking them to be able to do that from Monday morning to Wednesday night, I think that's too short a timeline. But I think final or near final plans need to be into the professional side probably before they're in our hands. I'm just not sure how many days in between, but I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be getting a packet on Friday or Monday. But
yeah,
that's
so
just
to
my
your
thought.
point, like if we say Brenda has to have everything for the packet by Friday, for example, if the person with that information needs Jim to review it, then they better get it to Jim before that so that it's inappropriate on Friday. I think that's my point. So I'm trying to step it back to what's the first step? And I feel like getting it packetable. And so if everything's in by Friday afternoon when Brenda's gone, because they get to go home early on Fridays, then that means it gives her Monday to just collate it all, if that's okay with Brenda. But yes, the understanding has to be that's not the deadline to get things in for our health agent review. You'd better make sure you've got that tied up in advance so that what you're submitting to Brenda is ready for the board to review and discuss. Changes after that, we could have all sorts of fine print. Things can happen, obviously, but what is that kind of drop dead for the packet? And therefore then backwards from that, when does I don't necessarily want to put down when it needs to be in Jim's hands at this point, because that to me could be a back and forth, especially if there's a plan review. So for me, that one feels more like you better go take care of that with Jim in advance, and so that what you're handing to us on Friday is ready.
Matt, if I can ask, please, when you say by Friday, do you mean Friday before the meeting date? So on Monday, that gets collated. And yes, the meeting packet has been sent out, but it's not always sent out on Wednesday. It normally is sent out on Monday. And I think from the last meeting, we kind of discussed having both the packet and the information by that Monday, the same date that we submit the meeting agenda to the clerk's office. So that way it can be sent out and you would have Monday and Tuesday to review. Am I correct? Or do you mean 7 days before?
No, just the one weekend. Because in my opinion, when you come in on Monday morning and you're getting ready to finalize that agenda, I know you have all day to do it, but when you're getting ready to finalize and post that agenda, you should have all of the material right next to you. And if you're missing something, that gives you that time to call somebody up and say, I'm about to take you off the agenda because you gave us no information.
Well, yes, but as we discussed at the last meeting, when I send you the meeting agenda on the Wednesday before, that's a final agenda. I normally do not edit that other than maybe a typo or a revision. But normally somebody doesn't come to me on a Thursday or Friday and say, hey, I need to get on the agenda for 3 days. I would say absolutely not. You need to go to the next agenda because the meeting agenda is pretty much set. Now, can it change? Yes, because we do have that timeline within the 48-hour time frame. But when I do a draft agenda and send it to the board, I say, this is a draft agenda. Do you have any edits or whatever? If not, this is going on Monday to the clerk's office. And on Monday, I send that same agenda, which is normally not edited other than maybe if I see a typo or something like that, that's sent on that Monday.
I think we all agree that yes, we recognize the agenda piece. I think we're talking about packet and content for review, because the agenda, having a line item for an address and a Title V waiver request, that's not adequate for we know what the conversation is, but we don't actually know what pieces are being done. So I think that's, again, there's kind of two parallel pieces of what's on the agenda and then the supporting materials for board review to go along with the items that are on the agenda.
Right. And I think the Friday would be adequate. So if there's something that may be missing for that Monday, and I've reached out to other people and say, hey, I haven't received your materials for the agenda on Wednesday. You need to send that to me. And hence, we got something at 6 something the last meeting, and they didn't reply.
So if I would propose, like I said, I could draft it up. Like, let's start. But the key question to me is still, Dan said it's okay. Is the rest of the board okay if Friday's the deadline, which means the packet would probably be assembled on Monday for our review, right? Is that enough time, or does Kevin Davis or Kevin Baker request a little more?
I think everything should be in by the Monday prior. I think it's 7 business days, 8 business days. That way Jim has a chance to look at it. That way Brenda has a chance to do her thing. I'd love to get the packet on the Friday before the meeting, so I have the weekend to look at it. My days are jammed. We're volunteers. And I think that's how it should go. Jim, is that enough time for you? This is all about you having the time to look at this stuff. You're muted.
Yeah, what I normally, I mean, again, most of what you're seeing are repairs. And so if an engineer has done the design and is getting ready to submit the paperwork and it needs variance requests, I always tell them, get the paperwork to the Board of Health office and get on the next agenda. Because I don't want the plans to come to our office. You know, we have 45 days to review them. I don't want somebody to wait 45 days. If it's on the agenda, I'm going to see it and get it reviewed. Just to try to make sure that process keeps moving for them.
So they should have it already well before that 7 business days prior to so they have it already. It's just a matter of them actually doing it and getting it to Brenda. So this should just sort of prompt them to do that. And so I don't think that's unreasonable. And I think it will help our entire process.
Matt has volunteered to help work a bit of a timeline. I think we just want to clarify what our timeline should look like. You know, do we say by Monday, draft agenda comes out with supporting materials on the Wednesday? Packet, even if it's not for the finalized agenda, comes out on Friday so that board members have the weekend to review. Formal agenda goes to town clerk on Monday. Something has changed between the packet and the draft version and Monday, that it changes. And then, you know, as long as the petitioners recognize that you put something in, you know, after that date, that, you know, potential for continuance increases. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But I don't know, Matt, does that seem to make sense as far as a timeline as well?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. I think that was all I had for that whole discussion was under correspondence. Do we have any other correspondence? All right. Any board member updates comments and public input. I have no one in the audience at the moment for public input. Any board member updates or comments? Mr. Baker.
I was not at the last meeting, but I did read the very thorough minutes that were approved from the last meeting, and I appreciate all of those board member comments and administration updates. So thank you guys for your hard work, everybody here, and yeah, keep going.
All right. No, thank you, Mr. Baker. We missed you last week, but we're glad you're back. All
And
right.
with that said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion on the floor. I have a second. Roll call vote. Alphabetical. Kevin Baker.
Votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis, yes.
Matt Wason.
Matt Wason, yes.
And the chair votes yes. The February 28th, 2024 Littleton Board of Health meeting stands adjourned.